Red-eyed tree frogs are one of the most famous and probably the most recognizable frog on the planet. They make great pets, but before you bring one home, you need the perfect enclosure, and I'm going to teach you how to make one. My name's Adam, this is a disgusting enclosure. You're watching Wickens Wicked Reptiles, stick around. So before we even get going, the enclosure behind me here is an 18 by 18 by 24 Exoterra enclosure. Any front opening enclosure would work perfect for this. I'm putting a pair, so a male and a female tree frog. Generally, red eyes do better in groups or at least in pairs. And they're pretty active frogs, so I'm giving them something that, although they're pretty tiny frogs, they're gonna have a lot of room to move around. Now this enclosure housed some crested geckos before. Actually, the tank beside them now has those crested geckos. They got an upgrade. So it's already bioactive. It already has a drainage layer. So what I would recommend is put down a drainage layer in whatever enclosure it is that you do, whatever enclosure that you buy or want to use, I would put a drainage layer. This already has it. And then put down some sort of membrane, garden cloth or window screen or whatever, so that whatever substrate you use doesn't sink down into that drainage layer. And then put your substrate layer down. And what we're going to use is just a mixture of topsoil, which is organic, coconut core, which is organic, some sand, which is organic, play sand, by the way, and some sphagnum moss. And in that substrate, we're gonna put things like isopods and springtails. This is going to help clean up any sort of mold and any sort of fecal matter, which I will be scooping out anyway, but it'll take care of any remnants that maybe I don't see. But before we do any of that, we need to clean this thing up, so let's do that. At this point, we've got a clean-ish enclosure, and what I did is I took the substrate out for a reason, because like I said, we're keeping the drainage layer, we're keeping the substrate, so why did I take it out? Well, this was a crested gecko enclosure, and the female, I let her lay the eggs right in the substrate and let the babies hatch right in the substrate. So there was a bunch of eggs that were already hatched, and there was two eggs that still had not hatched. And this hasn't been occupied for over 2 months, so they must be close, because crested geckos are like 70-ish days, something like that. So a couple of baby crested geckos, bonus. But now what we need to do is do the hardscape. By hardscape, what I mean is cork tubes, sticks, rocks, things that are not plants, basically hard things to make the scape. And now I know there's a lot of channels out there, including mine, where we've done before the foam background with dry lock or silicone and some sort of substrate on the background. And I like those. I think that we might do that in the future. But for now, I'm trying to make it as accessible as possible. If you go out and you get yourself a used enclosure like this one with one of the foam backgrounds that comes with it, I want you to be able to do it without some sort of crazy, like, days-long process. I want you to be able to take it home, have the materials, and make it in about an hour. So we're gonna make it look awesome, but definitely you could make it look awesomer with the background. And as you can see, this is teeming with little isopods. These are dwarf whites, and that's the reason why I didn't throw out the substrate. There are so many of these things. Like, it is crazy how many. Like, the camera doesn't even pick it up. There are so many isopods, and those are going to be great. And I've actually cultivated some of those and put them into a different enclosure and different container so that I can breed them off-site or out of this enclosure. Now, keep in mind, as you watch this, I am not an expert, so I don't really have a plan. As I'm going looking, oh, this plant would look cool here, this scape would look cool here. So in this case, if you are that type of person who just wants to do something for fun, not plan it out, write it out, not make a project of it, just have a good time, I would recommend maybe planting and doing hardscape together, as I'm finding out right now. And to be totally honest with you, I'm getting kind of sparse in the plant department. I don't really have a lot left. So we're gonna try some really cool tropical plants that for ground cover to make it look nice on the ground. But these are arboreal frogs who in the wild will sleep underneath broad leaves. So I've got a couple different types of alocasias, which I'm gonna try. And we've got these, they're called poly, or that's how they're sold anyway. I'm sure there's a scientific name for them. They're really big leaves, they're really broad, and that way they can kind of latch underneath, which is where they sleep during the day. It's also where they lay their eggs too. if you're really lucky. Now keep in mind, I'm trying to do this as if I were someone who doesn't do this for a living, just someone who, I got some extra plants, I have extra enclosure, let's throw it together. If you wanted to plan it out, there are definitely some philodendrons and some other broad, smoother leaves that would actually work a lot better, but these will work for what we're going after. Now this may take a few tries when you're planting and you're scaping, so don't get discouraged if it takes you a little bit longer. This one took me, well, quite a while. This video will be like 8 or 10 minutes, maybe less, but it took me a little bit of doing to get this going. And don't forget, while you plant, these plants are going to grow and it's going to fill in. So there's a few things that you can do, a few tricks that I've learned from other channels, Serpa Design, Troy Goldberg, those type of guys who are true professionals at doing this. What I like to do is put some moss on things that are hardscaped. So even the background, although it's made of styrofoam, it will grow there. So you can use toothpicks, or I guess these little stir sticks is what I had, and that's what I used to kind of put it into the background. I also created a little hook so that I could hook a little piece of philodendron on the back, because philodendrons will vine and they will kind of adhere to surfaces, right? So the cork bark, the background, things like that. And the pothos that I put in here as well, same sort of idea. That pothos is going to adhere to things like the background and the cork bark. And the calathea to an extent will vine also. So that's why I kind of put it in a position where it doesn't look the prettiest right now, but it will go towards the light and it will kind of perk up and it will spread. Now, red-eye tree frogs do need a large water basin, or a water basin big enough for them to get in, but not so deep they're gonna drown, that type of idea. So what I did is I left an area in the middle so I can put a water bowl. I think that a lot of people use basically the bottom of their enclosure as a water, just water instead of substrate. I don't really know how I would do that with plants, because then you need to put the plants on the background, and this doesn't really have a background, so that doesn't really work for this setup. So I put some of the allocation in the front and back on the other side of the corner. So one side here, one on the back corner, other side of the corners, in opposite corners is what I'm trying to say. And I put the cork bark kind of the opposite side. So basically what you're seeing is kind of 4 squares, right? Or 4 corners, which is how a square works. You've got your big polys, your big alocasia poly on the front left and back right, and then I did the opposite, so your back left and your front right, I did the cork tubes or cork rounds. And the nice thing with the cork rounds is these frogs are going to be able to get inside, they're going to go on the outsides, they can sit on the top, and moss is going to grow really well on this. Now, something I didn't mention, at the very beginning, this did not have a misting system, right? So it has a UVB light up above, like the entire rack system does, but I didn't have a misting nozzle hooked up to the Mist King, so I did that. I got a brand new screen top, I drilled a hole through it, I connected the nozzle, but first I had a little bit of a situation where I had a glass top enclosure over there and it wasn't evaporating as much, so it got waterlogged, so I took the nozzle from that one there. So right now it kind of looks like incomplete, and the reason is it's going to grow in, so don't worry, it will look better in about a month or 2 months. So now's a great time to hit the subscribe and bell notification so you know when that video comes, so I can show the update once everything's grown in. But the important thing to remember is that these frogs are going to be happy in this environment. It's going to have the correct temperature and the correct humidity. And I did leave the top uncovered. So it is a screen top that can evaporate, but it does have a misting system. Now, in the jungles of, say, Costa Rica, where they're from Central America, basically, right, Mexico to Panama. And when I was in Costa Rica a couple months ago, we found them. We found them in an area where it was about 80% humidity at night, and it was about 27 degrees Celsius. I'm not doing Fahrenheit for this video. The rest of the world can do Celsius, so can you. I'll put it right here, what it is in Fahrenheit. Anyway, generally, you don't want to get up into the 80s Fahrenheit for these frogs. So in this room, it's kind of perfect. I think it's 75.4 in this room right now. And in this enclosure, we're gonna monitor it, or you should, but the enclosure beside it is set up basically the exact same, and it gets up to about 78 during the day, and at night it drops down to about 70, sometimes 69, which is going to be fine for these frogs. If you want a full care guide on red-eye tree frogs, let me know. I'd be happy to do it for you. Hit the like button so I know that you want it. So that's the basics. Make sure that you have a water bowl, right? Because these are amphibians. They take in water through their skin, and also they're gonna take in whatever else. So make sure it's dechlorinated water. Reverse osmosis water is what I use. Make sure that if you don't have a misting system, you're using a manual mister. You can even use a squirt bottle, which is $1 at the dollar store. Make sure that you're using that. I recommend a few times a day. At night, it's going to be more humid than in the daytime, basically everywhere, but definitely where they're from. I know that I've been there, and if you read a care guide, which makes more sense. Spikes at night. So my misting system for the entire rack system goes pretty heavy in the morning and at night. So right as the lights go off, right as the lights come up, so that the lights, when it evaporates it stays. And then in the afternoon, there's a little shower, and that's it. So 3 sprays, 11 p.m., 6 a.m., and 3 p.m. But you could get away with spraying just before bed or in the morning and at night before you go to bed. And all that's left is to let your frogs go and have a fun time in this enclosure. So let me know what you think. Do you agree with the way that this is set up? Would you have done something different? Are you gonna take advice from this or not? That's fine too. Let me know in the comment section below. I'd really love if you did. Hit subscribe, hit like if you like videos like this. We're gonna do a whole bunch more. We need a lot of upgrades for new animals that we have. Did I tell you that I bought the most expensive reptile at the expo last week? Anyway, in a couple weeks, we'll do that video. But for now, how cute are these freaking frogs, man? The big one is the female, by the way. The special thank you to the Patreon supporters. You guys are amazing. You guys get extra videos. You know about that really expensive reptile that I bought. You know about another really cool dream species of amphibian that you've probably never even heard of that I got at the expo too, set up upstairs in quarantine. And for as little as $1 a month, you get all of that, discounts on the merch and more. And that's it. Because I do videos twice a week, that means I'll see you on Monday. Oh, and stay tuned for next week because I did this crazy collab this week. By the time this video comes out, I've already done it and I'm editing it probably. I am so excited. It is a dream come true to have, anyway, see you next week.